A lot of viewers will tell you Meet the Press hasn't quite been the same since Tim Russert's sudden death in 2008, and David Gregory is feeling the pressure to raise ratings on the Sunday morning talk show. A story in Monday's Washington Post revealed the network hired a psychological consultant to interview his wife, family, and friends. The idea, according to a network spokesperson, was to get an idea of what makes Gregory tick, to get perspective from those who know him the best. But it also struck a lot of people at the network as kind of odd, given that Gregory has worked there for more than 20 years. There are a lot of things about this that strike me as odd. What do you think?
Well, so first of all, is it a psychologist, or is it, as NBC called this person later, a brand consultant or something in between? It doesn't really surprise me that the network would be using techniques like this to find out how do we make this host, more likable? How do we increase our ratings? But also what doesn't surprise me is the fact that this probably was leaked by the network to the Washington Post, sending a signal perhaps about Gregory's future there.
I mean, I also think that what this shows is that the demographics of the Sunday morning talk shows are changing. And he's following Tim Russert, who had been there for decades.
And was beloved.
And was beloved, and people knew what they were going to get from him. I think in the Sunday morning talk shows, people are still trying to feel this out. And they were comfortable with Russert. They're comfortable with Bob Schieffer, who is at Face the Nation, who is the #1 rated program now. And they were comfortable with George Stephanopoulos. I remember when ABC took him off, their ratings plummeted, and they brought him back. So you're having some changes here, and I think he's just going through a growth spurt here.
Is the issue, though, just about the face that's on the program, or has the need for the Sunday morning talk show kind of diminished some now that we have 24-hour cable news networks that have the newsmakers, that have the politicians on answering questions? Sure, you've got Fox leaning to the right, you've got MSNBC leaning to the left, so maybe it isn't always that straight and narrow discussion. But is there still that same need that people are waiting till Sunday morning to get that?
I think there's more competition. On the other hand, there are still some very important people, politicians, for that matter, the advertisers, the institutional advertisers that reach out to those decision makers who watch those shows, who are still there. But in responding to all the additional competition that's out there now, what these shows are doing may be hurting them too, and Meet the Press is one of them. They used to do lengthy, in-depth interviews with politicians, government officials. They used to have very lively roundtables of journalists talking about the issues, but in a respectful way. Now it's sort of a shout fest like all the other cable shows. You have the politicians and the spokespeople coming in there, and all they're doing is spouting the lines of the day. They're not really engaging in any kind of interesting conversation, so they're kind of poisoning their own well.
And I think that's part of the issue here. I mean, when Russert was running the program, you didn't have those shout fests, and the guests knew coming in that wasn't going to work on his program. Gregory allowed some of that to happen, and once you start getting it, people are looking at it saying, wait a minute, this isn't any different than what I'm seeing on MSNBC or on Fox, so why should I waste my time watching it? So I think that's some issues there too, and I also think that he's doing these little bitty segments that don't really get into much depth, and I think that's causing some issues in terms of the audience as well.
And I think you have one other problem. I mean, Bob Schieffer at CBS and George Stephanopoulos at ABC are more or less perceived as playing it down the middle. You rarely see left or right complaining about the hosts. Gregory, whether it's perceived or real, a lot of criticism from the right about him leaning Democratic, which might have something to do with the fact that MSNBC has tainted the NBC brand.
And he did have his own show on MSNBC prior to this, so I think that has some issues there too.